So this week on the Mainly Moonology Podcast, I am so excited to welcome to the show one of the world's greatest living astrologers. I would definitely put him up there with the greatest on the planet. His name is Steven Forrest, and we're going to be talking about Pluto's move into Aquarius. So just when you thought there was nothing else to say about Pluto moving into Aquarius, we are going to find some more things to talk about Pluto moving into Aquarius. Now, let me just tell you, for those of you who don't know him, if you're just starting out in astrology, he's definitely an astrologer to check out. He's an American astrologer, a writer, a lecturer. He's the author of nearly a dozen astrological books and one of the founders of the School of Evolutionary Astrology, which he describes as a form of psychological astrology, which is integrated with metaphysics. And if you know anything about what I do, you're going to know that's right up my tree. So welcome to the show, Steven.
Well, I'm really happy to be here, Yazzie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So the first thing I wanted to say to you, Steven, is a little story, which is that you may or may not know that I wrote a book called Moonology. In fact, I have a whole brand called Moonology. For example, there is my desk calendar with a little astrology message for every day and a Moonology message. So I just wanted to tell you this funny little thing. I read your book. Is it called The Moon Book?
Yes.
I wrote Moonology in about 2016, I think, and I read your book probably in 2020. And I remember I was I'm sorry, I'm just looking for it on my bookshelf, but I can't see it. But I was fascinated by it. I was gripped by it. I loved it. But I remember putting it down when I'd finished it and thinking, oh my God, thank God I didn't read that before I wrote Moonology, because I never would have had the hide to think I could write anything after that. It's such a good book. So for anyone out there who is into the moon, I mean, it's actually not what Steven's known for at all, but you know, he's known for his wide-ranging reach in all parts of astrology. But if you are into the moon, highly, highly recommend The Moon Book by Steven Forrest. So with that said, with that little anecdote told, tell me, I have been talking about Pluto moving out of Capricorn and into Aquarius for so long, because it's been happening for so long. What can we say about this, Steven, that hasn't already been said about Pluto's move into Aquarius?
Well, it's needless to say, a huge subject, and the fate of the human race, I think, rests upon our successful response to Pluto entering Aquarius. I'm hoping we will muddle through, obviously, despite everything. A gigantic subject. I think the best place to start is
especially because a lot of my readers are very much beginners. So let's start at the very beginning.
Yeah, that's my natural audience too. I've always felt that my purpose in life is popularizing astrology.
Me
That's
too.
quite the right word, but it's just such a fantastic tool, and the world would be a better place if more people were aware of it and how they can work with it in their lives. So Pluto, 248-year orbit. So you don't want to hold your breath waiting for it to enter a new sign. And it entered Capricorn in 2008. It's there today. It's been kind of slipping back and forth over the frontier for the last couple of years with Aquarius.
Yeah.
Next month, it's solidly in Aquarius, where it will stay until 2044. So I hope you like it. Now, the nature of Pluto, it's the lord of the underworld, of course, to the Romans, and a loose translation would be the god of hell. And that doesn't do Pluto full justice. Pluto will bring dark things to the surface, but Pluto also represents the strength that we humans have for wrestling with dark things. It's our inner shaman, our inner wise psychoanalyst, and so we need the emotional courage to face difficult things, and that's nobody enjoys that. Like nobody enjoys being in psychotherapy, for example, but it's worth it potentially, and that's pretty much the spirit of Pluto. So whenever it's in a specific sign, it's always in one, of course, it will bring up the shadow side of that sign. So um, Pluto entered Libra, sign connected with relationships and marriage back in the early 1970s, 71 or so. And immediately marriages begin to break up, left and right. The divorce rates went through the ceiling. Divorce became a national sport in every industrialized country, probably the unindustrialized ones too.
I remember being at school and it felt like everybody's parents were splitting up.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Now, here's the question that deepens our understanding. It's like, so the collapse of marital stability that was related to Pluto in Libra.
Libra being the sign of relationships.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And it's obviously the question is a little too slippery to answer it simply with a yes or a no. If Pluto brings honesty, and so honesty entering a relationship will sometimes destroy a relationship, but it might also deepen a relationship. What was going on is collectively the higher self, everybody's trying, whether they know it or not, to integrate the virtue of Plutonian emotional honesty and nakedness into their relationship life. And some relationships were not able to handle that, but it's like we set the bar higher. Intimacy was defined differently. And we see the lasting results of that. Now, that goes back, over 50 years. So some people in your audience didn't experience it directly, but many probably got it through their parents breaking up. Pluto entered Scorpio next, 1983, and stayed there till 95. One dimension of Scorpio is sexuality. We had the AIDS crisis, and there it was, the god of
Yep.
hell entering the sign of human sexuality, and yet there was a reaction against the trivializing of human sexuality that had happened with Pluto and Libra. Suddenly, it's like, if I make love with this person, I might die.
I might kill them or I might die.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or I might kill them, and so let's give this some thought. This is a serious energy, and that was the thing we're trying to learn. 95, it goes into Sagittarius, a sign often correlated with religion, and we begin to see the rise of all this religious fueled terrorism and kind of extremism. The priests caught with their hands in people's pants, and it's like truth came to the surface about the dark side of religion. 2008, Pluto entered Capricorn, where it still is today. So we're all swimming in this energy right now. I'll say a little bit more about this. So every sign has a positive dimension and a negative or shadow side. That's simply how astrology works. Capricorn, at its best, it's integrity. It represents, here's a key word, traditional values. And so I think of traditional values. Here are some. If you have a kid, take responsibility. It's serious to have a kid. Your dignity as a human being depends on being a good parent. You've done it now. Okay, that's a good value, solid, long history. Humans have felt that way all along. Be a person of your word. Tell the truth. Show up. Keep your promises. These are all beautiful things. A little boring to talk about, but
I
they're
kind of
beautiful.
like them actually.
Well, good. Me too. I'm a
I must be old
Capricorn.
fashioned.
Yeah, okay. I've got some of that in me too. So, but where I go with this, as we look at the shadow, there's nothing shadowy about any of those things. But here's a value that's been around for a long time. So it's an example of a long tradition which people have viewed in moral terms. Here it comes. The idea that women are subordinate to men. Wives should obey their husbands. Now, I'm not endorsing this idea before anybody throws tomatoes at me, but I want to say it's been around for a long time. Here's another one. It's a sin. It's an abomination for two people of the same gender to have a sexual relationship. That was often viewed in moral terms. And so what we've been seeing
And you're getting, sorry, with that, you're getting the sort of laying down the law of what is right and wrong with Capricorn.
Exactly. That's Capricorn. So it's like the boil has broken on the dark side of traditional values. We've been simply invited to sort out our sense of what is right and what is wrong. And so we've observed, actually, despite the chaos, a great healing. We can the word conservative is, of course, very charged politically lately. I mean it in kind of the broader sense, and there are good conservative values and bad conservative values. We've been seeing the dark side of conservatism. We've been seeing the dark side of the kind of patriarchal father archetype. We could name a list of obvious politicians who embody the dark father and people's bizarre devotion and dependency upon the abusive father. I mean, this is mucky stuff, but it's Pluto in Capricorn. I have to say, personally, I'm looking forward to a change of the weather, as far as all that goes, and we're about to have it, guaranteed.
Well, as a Cancerian, I am too.
I bet. Yeah, me a Capricorn and you a Cancerian. So you've had the opposition, I've had the conjunction, and I'm sure there has been some drama in your life. It
I
always
don't
has.
even want to go there.
Yeah. So Aquarius, every sign can be seen as a reaction against the previous one. That's just a good little mental game to play. And so, Capricorn has that conservative quality, Aquarius a progressive quality. And, so everybody in your audience who's a political progressive probably thinks, well, good, but is there a dark side to progressivism? And, clearly, Aquarius has a technological kind of quality. It's a sign of genius. Is there a dark side to technology? We think the explosion of interest and fear in around artificial intelligence, is classic Pluto in Aquarius. It's like our first real taste of all of this.
And
I'm thinking,
actually also, glimpses not just of the fear, but actually of the kind of almost valid fear, because I remember reading an article really early on, I think it was in the Times, about the dark ways that AI can be used to manipulate people. It goes beyond, people writing ebooks in 5 seconds.
yes, exactly. It's completely terrifying in terms of its nightmarish side.
Yeah,
Uh, the idea of setting it loose on you know the question of drug interactions, which is a plague that people don't like to talk about. It's just too complicated a question for the doctors to figure out. Maybe AI can do it. AI cure cancer. I mean, who knows what will
true.
happen? Design warp drive, so it's can we handle it? Can
No,
we handle
I
this?
don't think we can, frankly.
I don't know either, but we've got front row seats.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like astrology in action. Once you get the basics of astrology, it proves itself to you. You can just see it in the headlines, the mirror of history.
So one thing you said early on when we started talking was about how the future of humanity kind of is up for, well, not grabs, but you know what I mean, talking about the future of humanity. And people might not realize one of the reasons I think why Stephen would have said that is because Aquarius actually represents society and humanity and all this. And now we have the Lord of the Underworld, you know, the Dark Lord. I also like to just sort of, because I'm quite into the divine feminine, I do like to sort of think, well, can there be a bit of the dark goddess in there, coming into the sign of society? So apart from AI, what do you reckon about Pluto and Aquarius in that way?
Well, we're going to find a new set of leaders. Pluto has a charisma. I'm tempted to say a sexiness. That can be
Yeah.
one expression of Pluto, but certainly an intensity, a charisma, a presence. And with Pluto in Capricorn, we've had leaders on the conservative side who've had that mesmerizing impact on people. I think we're about to see the energy shifting. We have leaders on the progressive side that will have that charisma. And again, if we're kind of liberal in our leanings, that sounds like an improvement over what we've been through. I mean, that's my sentiment. But to be honest about it, we have to recognize that some of these progressive leaders, even if their hearts are in the right place, their ideas might be wrong. Illustration, you mentioned you're Australian originally, so you know about the transportation, when Britain decided to get rid of all of its thieves and scoundrels by shipping them to the antipodes,
Yeah.
purging the gene pool and creating, a Britain that would be free.
Creating Australians.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, it's kind of a liberal idea, it's very scientific. It was wrong, but, it had that scientific kind of patina. And so what happened, it produced, one of the most law-abiding and peaceful generations ever, the first 3 or 4 generations in Australia, and crime rates went through the roof in Britain. It was a progressive idea that didn't work with Pluto and Aquarius. Another one, the French Revolution, which was ostensibly progressive, get rid of the king and the queen and, rational systems and all of that. And of course, it turned into a bloodbath. It was a catastrophe and quickly led to Napoleon. So, the best laid plans of mice and men,
Yeah.
we were hoping for visionary, charismatic leaders, that this is what the fate of the earth depends upon, that we have not only the good heart, but also the clear thinking, like who will make the decisions about how artificial intelligence plugs into our lives. It's possible to live with that and maybe benefit from it. It's also possible to blow ourselves up with it.
Yeah.
Who's in charge? Who's got the vision? Who's the
Yeah.
genius?
And what do you think, Stephen, given the fact that probably during the Pluto and Aquarius, this is a really random question, okay, so just be prepared. But what do you think about the fact that during the Pluto and Aquarius era, we're almost certainly going to see a human base on the moon? So that's obviously a big shift for humanity. If Elon Musk and his mates have their way, we might even see something on Mars. And the question all my skeptical friends always say is, what happens when that happens? Because astrology is not going to work because it's from the Earth, and obviously Aquarius is the sign of astrology. Have you had any thoughts about what might happen to astrology during this period?
I love it. It actually, my response is cut from the same basic cloth as mentioning AI, that we have no idea what we're unleashing with
Yeah.
it. And similarly, the first baby born on the moon will not have the moon in their chart,
Yeah.
but they will have Earth in their chart. What the heck does that mean? The first baby born on Mars two tiny little moons, Phobos and Deimos, on Mars, nothing like our moon. They're minuscule by comparison, and they'll have Earth in their chart too. And we will be creating when we start giving birth on these other worlds, we'll be creating an alien race, quite literally. They'll have our genetic coding, they'll have our bodies, but their psyches are going to work very differently. I keep waiting for somebody to write a science fiction novel about a ship's astrologer, and we enter a double star system, and the planet with 7 moons, or something like Avatar, or on a moon,
That'd be amazing.
and the astrologer has to figure out how to talk to these people, figure out how personalities work. They'll be very different.
Yeah, okay. So, boiling it down for people, I suppose the answer is, if you want to know what it means for you personally, then you need to find out where Aquarius is in your chart. And that's where you're going to have a chance for, explosions and eruptions. And what can you expect when you look at where Pluto is in your chart?
Yeah. Well, there's no substitute for sitting with an astrologer. If you're not already familiar with the system, you may many of your listeners will have a planet in Taurus, for example, and what that will mean is that's during Pluto's passage through Aquarius, Pluto's going to make a 90-degree angle with anything in Taurus. And whatever that planet is, you're going to have, let's say, a growth opportunity, which will probably come heralded by a certain amount of drama in your
Yeah.
life.
One
Venus.
image I love for Pluto, and I hope you agree with this, is the idea of a snake shedding its skin.
Yes.
And so, so if you're Taurian and you're hearing this, or you're Taurus rising, or you've got planets in Taurus, don't freak out. Another image I love for Pluto is the healing crisis. So it can be a crisis, but it's healing, or it can be a shedding, but it can be like a shedding of the skin to newness. It's just, often it's quite, people say with the dark goddess will crack you wide open. And Pluto, I think, can crack you wide open.
Yes.
But
yes.
ultimately, healing crisis. And also, what I like to say to people as well is this with Pluto is, like, it can be a struggle to the death. But if you go into whatever crises you're going into, go in there looking for a win-win outcome, because that's kind of, I feel like it's the best way to work with Pluto, is to look for the win-win outcome. So you're not trying to vanquish someone, you're not being vanquished, you're transforming. Big Pluto word, transformation. Yeah. What do you think?
That's all totally accurate. It's a true story. I think will make this come alive. There's a gentleman I worked with who'd been physically abused by his father, hit a lot. And of course, that makes a mess of a kid. And is a righteous man. He's an adult now, married with a kid of his own. And passionately, he says to me, I swear I will never do that to my own son. I will never hit my son. Righteous attitude.
Yeah.
Well, his kid, one night, he's in a Pluto time. His kid is driving him crazy, doing what kids do. And he loses it and he smacks his kid. And, and it's like any statistical psychologist will tell you, an excellent predictor that you'll abuse your children is you were abused yourself. These things get passed down.
Yeah.
So that obviously wasn't this man's most glorious moment. He hit his son, but he had grace enough to be ashamed of that. See, here's Pluto bringing his wound to the surface. He'd understood it in
For healing.
principle. Yeah, exactly. It was time for it to heal. And often, not necessarily, but often, healing will begin with the crisis. First we see the problem, we have to admit it. We see it. And this guy then
Yeah.
went into deep psychotherapy. And my impression is that he actually resolved the woundedness, brought the material to the surface. If it
And
had
psychotherapy, by the way, very Pluto.
Yeah, psychotherapy is the perfect metaphor for Pluto. Not
Yeah.
everybody needs to be in psychotherapy just because they're in a Pluto transit, but it's like that soul healing, the original meaning of the word. We can do it ourselves, we can do it with our friends, but
Yeah.
it only works with honesty.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing to mention to people, actually, two things. I think the first thing I ever learned about Pluto, it's like chuck out your dead wood, detox, lance the boil, clean up the wound. But the other thing as well, just so no one gets too scared, Pluto is often said by astrologers to be very psychological. So it's not necessarily things are going to happen. It's more like the chance to really, transform your thoughts, and it's intangible things often, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I imagine Gautama the Buddha, for example, going through a Pluto transit, and he senses it and sits down under the Bodhi tree and sits there quietly for a couple of years and works through it without any events in the world. But most of us are at Gautama the Buddha, and so we often need a wake-up call,
Yeah.
and something happens, we do something or something happens to us
Yeah.
and
To force the issue if we're not paying attention.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And when we're just being human and something difficult happens, it's hard to understand it. Like what's really going on here?
Yeah.
Why is this happening? And that's where astrology can come in. It can help you answer that question. It can
Yeah.
give you the intellectual construct that
Yeah.
gets you barking up the right tree. You've got to do the work yourself.
Yeah.
Astrology will do it for you.
Yeah.
But astrology can guide you. It's like the weather report.
Yeah. And now you don't have a Pluto book, do you? Because I'm always recommending Healing Pluto Problems by Donna Cunningham to people when they've got Pluto going over their sun or their ascendant or something like that.
Yeah, that's a fine piece of work, Donna Cunningham's book. I miss her.
Yeah.
I actually did write the book of Pluto, so
Oh, you've got the book of Pluto as
yeah,
well. My
yeah.
God, I have so much reading to do. I've got to read all your books. I've got to read them all. All right, that's amazing. So we've talked for ages about Pluto, but I do want to. I said when we were chatting before we hit record, we're not going to hit the new moon, but we are going to hit the new moon before next week's podcast. So
Yes.
let's touch on the new moon, because on November the 1st we have the new moon taking place in the sign of Scorpio. I'll just say it's actually November the 1st pretty much all over the world. And Scorpio actually is it's like a harbinger for Pluto, because
Yeah.
it's the sign. I mean, Pluto is a modern planet. You take it away, Stephen. You know where I'm going with this.
Yes, yes. Well, the key with the new moon is there's no moon in the sky. People understandably, forgivably, often confuse it. They'll see a little crescent moon and, oh, come look at the new moon with me. It's so beautiful. Well, we should go save the astronomy lesson for later. But the new moon occurs, of course, when the moon and the sun are lined up. The half of the moon that's brightly lit by sunlight is facing away from us. We're looking at the dark side of the moon, which means we don't see it at all. Plus, it's lost in the sunlight. So here's the key, just based on the poetry behind the astronomy I just said. A new moon is a new beginning that gives no evidence of its existence. That one line is so powerful.
Yeah.
And it's like a person is in a week, 10 days, when we come to the new moon, the next one in Scorpio, as you say. Here's a true story. I guarantee it's true. A woman sits down on a park bench in London, and she sits there for 45 minutes, and then she gets up and walks away. It's not much of a story, as far as what we can see, obviously. But during that 45 minutes, she came to a scorpionic insight something like with that Pluto feeling, doesn't feel comfortable. Maybe she realized, I don't love my partner anymore, you know? I mean, ouch, my God, that's complicated, but take some courage to admit it. But oh my God, I don't love my partner anymore. And she gets up and walks away from the bench. From the worldly point of view, nothing happened. She just sat on a bench. But, from the angel's point of view, this is the first day of the rest of her life. And that's how a new moon energy works. New insights arise. We start the wheels turning in a new way. And often this sometimes works like clockwork, where as you come out to the full moon about 2 weeks later, the thing that began invisibly often is fully manifest. Maybe this is when she has the talk,
Yeah.
with her partner. It's not always quite that mechanical, but it's good to kind of set your intentions at a new moon, and then you'll watch them unfold. You have
Yeah.
the wind in the
Yeah,
universe at
yeah.
your back.
And this new moon actually is taking place ahead of harmonious alignment between Jupiter and Chiron. And I don't know if you work with Chiron, but I think it's, it does bring that plutonic healing energy in, and then that's obviously a healing kind of energy as well. So, hopefully it can be a healing time for people.
Yes, yes. With Chiron, it is deeply related to woundedness in us. It's often called the wounded healer. People often make the mistake of starting with healer, but they should start with wounded. That's where the work begins. And if we, as each house and sign position of Chiron will refer to certain kinds of wounds, and as we deal with them, obviously we healing ourselves. There's an immediate benefit, but the deeper point is, as we heal from a wound, we kind of know the pathway back to wholeness because we've forged that pathway. And there arises with Chiron a great hunger to share that information with other people who are similarly wounded. My favorite illustration is somebody has the disease of alcoholism and they join Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's not long before they have a sponsor, somebody who also has the disease, but hasn't had a drink for 15 years or something like that. And that's a person, a chironic figure, the sponsor, who has the wound, but has healed the wound, is a way of saying it, perhaps more precisely, found a way to live with the wound so that the wound does not control their life any longer. That's really what the healing comes down to. And they can share the map, and it feels good for them, and obviously helps others too.
So I think that's absolutely beautiful. And also it speaks to the idea of something that I know has fallen into disfavor, probably rightly so, but people often would talk about Chiron as the wound that will not heal. But in a way, what you're saying is beautiful there, because it's okay, maybe it doesn't heal, but you learn to live with it so it doesn't control your life. It's like that other saying, which I really love, don't bleed on the one that didn't cut you. Don't take your past traumas. So I think, again, just to try and bring it down to super practical for people listening, like at the new moon this week on November the 1st, think about what in your life needs healing. There's a lot of healing energy around, and Pluto changing signs is going to be healing in some ways. It's going to be challenging in others. Okay. All right. Amazing. So we always do a reader question every week, Stephen.
Mhm.
And what I would like to do this week is one I've got from someone called Sarah, who's actually from London. And it's about Pluto in Aquarius. She's Aquarius and she's worried. So what would you say to all the Aquarians out there who are listening to this and thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Yes, you're doomed, right? Well, there's a principle that I've found works pretty well, at least in the population of folks I work with. That's actually going to be an important phrase. But when Pluto comes along, you're ready to deal with the wound. We're not going to whitewash it. There are some hard things to face, but we can. An analogy, I don't know the system in Britain, but in America, we rate movies. There are movies that we don't want the children to see. We go like PG-13, parental guidance for 13 years
We have
old.
all
You
that.
can watch this movie, and it's a crude system, but it gives us a lot of insight into Pluto. Like there are things that you just can't even begin to work on when you're 10 years old.
Yeah.
You just don't have the basis for it. And so we naturally want to shield a child from these things, like questions of like rape, for example. A kid just isn't in a position to grasp that. And then we reach a certain age and maybe we're ready, and this is the delicate point. In the lives of people who are living examined lives, I want to be careful. There's not like sainthood or anything like that, but
No,
the
but
kinds
living
of people,
consciously.
kind of people who are listening to us right now, have
Exactly.
the motivation, the curiosity about life. That's all it takes. In that population, I found it quite reliable to say that when Pluto comes along, you're ready to face the thing that you need to face. You're strong enough to do it, and it won't be easy, but think of the prize. The healing is so energizing and
Yeah.
liberating, and the
And it's
wonderful
like a
thing.
detox on your whole life.
Yeah, exactly. Spiritual detox, psychological detox,
Yeah.
hard but worth it, just like therapy. Once
Yeah.
again, the analogy. People who've been drinking beer in front of the television and calling that a life. So yeah, so there it is. If your Aquarian friend Sarah, the fact that she's engaged with her life and examining it is demonstrated by the fact that she's paying attention to this kind of information. I
Yeah.
think she'll be fine. And the thing with Pluto that doesn't get emphasized enough, in my opinion, is the prize. So many astrologers, even sound psychological astrologers, it's like, oh, here comes Pluto, it's going to be tough, but in 3 years, you'll smile again, perhaps.
If you're
And
lucky.
and and there may be some truth in that. And it's a bit of an overstatement, but could be some truth in it. But what they're missing is the prize.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of energy to be crazy. It's a waste of our energy.
Yeah.
Uh, and what if we're not crazy anymore? I mean, it's a crude word to use, but as psychological healing, making us less crazy,
Yeah.
it frees up that energy and it turns into creativity and
Yeah.
charisma and leadership and libido. And
Yeah.
it's like it's your energy. What are you going to do with it? Well,
Such a good point.
whatever you please.
Yeah.
It's yours.
Yeah. 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 Amazing, Stephen. Thank you. Look, I always do a card. I pulled a card. I've seen it, but before I tell everyone what the card is, because it's the card for the week and it's what we need for this new moon in Scorpio and the upcoming Pluto. Tell everybody about what you've got coming up, where they can find you, what you're doing with Astrology University, all that. Because genuinely, guys who are listening, this is one of the foremost astrologers on the planet at the moment. So if you can catch his work, catch it. I do have a reading list of your books to catch up with, I have to confess. But my son's just turned 18. He's about to go on a gap year, so I'm going to have reading time.
Oh, great, great. Well,
So, yeah, where can we find you? What are you doing? And then we'll do
I'm
the card.
always busy. I am a Capricorn. Uh, so my website, Forrest Astrology, two R's in Forrest, forrestastrology.com. That's general information about my work. I have a school, an online school, the Forrest Center for Evolutionary Astrology. It's almost the same website, except forrestastrology.center, for the school. I'll be
Center, I
doing,
suppose, spelt the American way.
yeah, there you go.
ER, not RE, as we spell it over here.
Yeah, thanks. we'll be doing a webinar about Pluto and Aquarius in the counseling room. It's called the new face of Pluto, how Pluto in Aquarius is a different beast than Pluto in Capricorn. A lot of astrologers will be based on their last 10 or 15 years of experience of Pluto, are suddenly going to find the rug pulled out from underneath them, that a lot of their old stuff that was working fine with Pluto in Capricorn will need to be adjusted as it moves into Aquarius. It's a different creature. And so that the seminar I'll be doing for Astrology University, you can also Google, and that'll be on November 2nd. So that's
And
what
who's
I'm
your
up to.
audience for that? Is that people who are starting out, already intermediate, already astrologers? Who's that for?
The webinar will be for people. A lot of it will be aimed at astrological counselors, but it won't be so technical that a person who has some basis in astrology wouldn't be able to follow it. I'd say anybody in the spiritually gifted and talented program, would do fine with it.
Because also there are a lot of people who work as herbalists or Reiki masters or yoga teachers who know just a bit about astrology. Would it be good for them to come along, because then they can start to understand how, because this is a massive energetic shift, everybody. Like, this is not just Jupiter changing signs or even Saturn changing signs. This is huge.
This is huge. This changes the world. So, yeah, absolutely. Energy workers, counselors, anyone will benefit from it, I think. And the reason is that what I'm going to be focusing on, and this will be kind of detailed and specific, that there are certain symptoms that we'll all be facing or wrestling with, and let's define them and recognize them so that when they come up, we know what we're looking at and we understand the resolution. I call it 6 plagues. There are 6 plagues that will be impacting humanity. And the key here, that sounds so negative, but the key here is that as we resolve these things, that's good for us, of course, personally, but it's also sets up a kind of vibration that supports others in making similar resolutions.
And they're not 6 medical symptoms, presumably.
Yeah, exactly. And it's our connectedness is really what we're talking about here. That, it's like, oh, we cringe before Pluto and Aquarius, it's the end of the world, or no, it's the beginning of some utopian existence. Astrologers will project their own feelings, onto it. But the truth of it is that what will happen with Pluto and Aquarius is nothing but the sum of 8.5 billion people making choices, and if enough of us make the right choices and the right responses, we create a human future worth living.
Yeah, well, that's basically the best possible outcome here, isn't it? Transformation of humanity. So, okay, so it's forrestastrology.com,
Yeah.
or Google Astrology University Pluto, and
Yeah,
you'll
just
get to it.
Astrology University gets you to the website, and you
Yeah,
can
and then
get all
Google
the
Steven
particulars.
Forrest or Pluto or whatever. I will put all the links in the show notes and in the newsletters and on the websites and so on. So do you want to know what the card we got is for
Yeah,
the new moon,
curious.
Scorpio and Pluto and Aquarius? Very interesting. Given that we've got the new moon in Scorpio, and then we've got Pluto into Aquarius, very fixed energy. Don't know if you can read it. It says flexible.
Let's see.
Flexible.
Flexible. Oh, wonderful. I love
Yeah,
that.
so it's almost like all this fixed energy, stay flexible. It's
Yeah.
teachability, open-mindedness, being adaptable without compromising what's important. A tree's roots are solidly planted in the ground, yet its branches can bend in a hurricane. A rigid structure like a building would come down, but the tree will bend. So maybe the lesson to us is to remain supple, even as we move through these times. Stay
Beautiful.
curious, stay open, stay aware. at this time, others will be more flexible with you too. So there we go. A little message from the
down to
cosmos.
willingness to learn.
Yes, exactly. That's the first word is in there is actually teachability.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
perfect.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to. I always transcribe these things so I can write the show notes and everything. I can't wait to read it back. And just a reminder again, you have a book called The Pluto Book. You said. So I'm going to have to read the Pluto book. I recommend everyone reads the Pluto book. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you.
I'm sure it's going to be an amazing webinar.
Thank you.